Cataldo challenged the legitimacy of the charges. Massachusetts has no law criminalizing suicide. Being an accomplice to a lawful activity could not be a crime, and while free speech has certain limits, one cannot make true threats. Michelle did not threaten Conrad. Cataldo had spent 2 years on the case, and one of his motions to dismiss had reached the state's highest court. At trial, he produced a single significant witness. On the morning of June 12, Peter Bregan, a short, plump, 81-year-old doctor who frequently provides expert testimony in cases involving psychopharmacology, walked up the aisle, showed himself through the little wooden gate, and settled onto the witness stand. Bregan proposed a theory that he called involuntary intoxication. At one time, he said, Michelle Carter had been the most loved person anybody had ever met. She always wanted to help people. When she was helping, she was being Michelle on a very intense level. In April 2014, a doctor prescribed her 5 milligrams of the antidepressant Celexa. The drug, Bregan testified, contorted her helping nature, until she convinced herself that abetting Conrad's suicide was itself a form of help. Throughout Cataldo's examination, Rayburn sat with a copy of the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders on the table in front of her. When it was time for her cross-examination, she picked up the 3-pound dark purple book and asked Bregan to show her the section on involuntary intoxication. "Would you give me the page?" Bregan asked. Rayburn repeated her request. "That's a legal term," Bregan said. "But it's not in the DSM?" Moniz asked. "No," Bregan said. "Good," Moniz said. "Next question." Bregan later asserted that an involuntary intoxication was based on a number of clinical conditions that could be found in the DSM. Rayburn's cross-examination painted Bregan as a self-sabotaging enthusiast for dates, like an eschatologist who pins down the end of times a little too firmly. Delving into Michelle's prescription history, Rayburn forced him to adjust and readjust his timeline in open court. The date of involuntary intoxication, July 2nd, became a period of time around July 2nd. His answers dissolved into cones. After Rayburn referred to a damaging text Michelle sent Sam, "They read my messages with him. I'm done. His family will hate me and I could go to jail." Bregan said, "Yes, and that is a very good demonstration of her innocence." Spectators in the courtroom were laughing at him. After watching Bregan on the stand, I found it hard to imagine anyone trusting his expertise. Why had the defense chosen him? Michelle and her parents declined multiple requests to be interviewed for this story, but a character statement that David Carter would later submit to the court suggested an answer. "I am convinced the medication she was taking affected her mental state, which made it difficult for her to distinguish between right and wrong." In the same way Michelle explained Conrad's death to the Roys, Celexa explained Michelle's actions to the Carters. Involuntary intoxication was another term for adolescence, the external force that strikes your child's life and redirects it beyond your control. He was only 18, Lynn Roy told me, one evening this past summer, while we sat in her friend's backyard in Dartmouth. A baby. He was vulnerable. Teenage boys get easily persuaded, easily manipulated by girls, because they can't show their feelings. On June 16th, the day of the verdict, there was not an empty seat in the courtroom. Michelle wore a pale pink blouse stenciled with water lilies. When Moniz took the bench, he announced immediately that the state had not proved that the text messages caused Conrad's death. Cataldo set his jaw and put his arm around Michelle. Michelle whispered something to Cataldo. Then she covered her face with her hands and appeared to weep. But Moniz changed course. Approximately 200 years ago, he said, an inmate at the Hampshire jail was charged with causing the murder of the man in the next cell. Cataldo's mouth opened and his eyes narrowed. Michelle collected herself. The man who killed himself in 1815 was a convicted murderer named Jewett. The night before he was to be hanged publicly, Jewett hanged himself in his cell. Guards later told a jury that the petty thief in the next cell had persuaded Jewett so relentlessly. Why let the hangman have his fee? That he bore responsibility for the suicide. Instructing his jury, the judge in the case told them not to consider Jewett's impending death as a mitigation of the thief's crime. The culprit, though under sentence of death, is cheered by hope to the last moment of his existence, the judge had said. Moniz derived the moral. Whether Conrad would have taken his life at another time does not control or even inform this court's decision. Knowing that Conrad was in the truck, Moniz said, Michelle took no action. She did not call the police or Mr. Roy's family. She did not notify his mother or his sister, even though just several days before that she had requested their phone numbers. And finally, she did not issue a simple additional instruction: get out of the truck. Consequently, he said, Michelle's failure to act, where she had a self-created duty, constituted each and all wanton and reckless conduct. As for Bregan, Moniz said, the court did not find that analysis credible. Moniz asked Michelle to stand. Cataldo put a steadying hand on her shoulder. Moniz pronounced her guilty. On August 3rd, he sentenced Michelle to 15 months. A stay of the sentence allows her to remain free pending appeal. Though Moniz did not mention it, the jury in the Jewett case had voted to acquit, but Moniz had something that those jurors lacked: a written record. He had before him a member of the generation that grew up with digital carbon paper beneath their adolescence. After the sentencing, I met Evan Andrews at a coffee shop in Norfolk. He wore a blue polo shirt and spoke cautiously. He became close to Michelle after the indictment, he told me, and spent many hours at her house during the trial. Michelle and I are so tight because we've both been through shit, he said. She helped me come out to my parents. He told me that he and Michelle had gone in depth about the night Conrad died, but also said he didn't want to speak for his best friend. What I think, he said, the vibe that I get, it was not as malicious as the DA makes it seem. She ordered him to get back in. That's not Michelle. I can't picture her screaming at somebody. I asked how he understood why she did what she did. It's not just medicine, he said. It's anxiety, her eating disorder. At one point during our conversation, I offered that a number of people had described Michelle as needy. Evan bristled. Not needy, he said. In need. Is that different? That her best friend could not imagine Michelle as complicit in a homicide did not, of course, invalidate the state's case. But there was an element of Rayburn's argument that disturbed me. The idea that there had been a premeditated scheme, complete with dry runs and cover-ups, seemed dubious. Between June 29th and July 12th, Conrad towed the edge of the cliff and backed away. The night of July 9th, he was ready to go with a generator. Michelle asked, "How long till you die?" Conrad said he didn't know. Could be in 5-30 minutes. 3 minutes passed. Michelle wrote, Wait, so this is serious, right? Like the thing is on and you're gonna die soon? At 5:32 the next morning, Conrad? At 8:41, Conrad, please answer me right now, you're scaring me. Was that a cover-up? It seemed more plausible that the suicide flickered as a possibility without settling into reality. Michelle compounded this impression by threading her text to Conrad with fiction. Because nothing like this had ever happened to her, she had to build the framework from the materials at hand, culled from white teen culture. In July 2013, Corey Monteith, a star of the TV show Glee, had overdosed in a hotel room. His co-star and real-life girlfriend, Lea Michele, led the cast in a tribute episode. Michelle texted Conrad word for word from it. On July 7th, 5 days before Conrad's suicide, Michelle went to see The Fault in Our Stars. At the movie's climax, a terminal cancer patient dying in his Jeep calls his girlfriend for help. Afterward, Michelle texted Conrad, "I literally can't stop crying, LOL. What's up with you?" What makes these allusions uncanny is Conrad's apparent unfamiliarity with the source material. Like many sad young men, he professed to believe that television and social media were turning his generation apathetic. A day after Michelle texted a long, unattributed quote from Lea Michele, Conrad wrote, "I think it's getting really out of hand, especially with all these shows, and the media is ruining what culture is supposed to be like." The dissonance caught my attention. It implied not that Michelle was successfully writing some script in which Conrad was a character, but that he was incommensurate with the intensity Michelle projected on him. I came to feel that a shape existed in her mind that predated him. I reread all the evidence from the beginning and thought I saw the shadow of another story. The week before Conrad's suicide, Michelle's mind was somewhere else. "Do you remember me being best friends with a girl named Alice?" She texted a classmate, Emmy Lambalot. Michelle texted Livy Masalgo about Alice, too. "I'm obsessed with her, like, I don't know how to stop. Every love song or whatever, it's her I think about." To another friend, she said that a therapist had told her she was going through a grieving process. She said, "I just have to find a way to get closure." Meanwhile, Conrad was towing barges off Menemshaw with his father. In August, I called Alice. I said that she sounded like an important person in Michelle's life. Alice agreed to meet me at a Panera in Franklin, coincidentally, in the same shopping center where Cordaldo has his office. When I got there, she was with her mother, Kelly Felsman, a sturdy woman who works in the cafeteria at Bellingham High. Kelly did most of the talking. In the summer of 2012, she said, when the two girls met, Alice was depressed. "I personally think Michelle picked up on that," Kelly said. She claimed to have disliked Michelle immediately. She compared her to Eddie Haskell from Leave It to Beaver. "Super nice. No kid is that nice." Kelly felt Michelle was a bad influence. The girls were texting in the middle of the night. She confiscated Alice's phone. Every morning, Kelly's husband brought it with him to work. One day, he noticed that Alice had switched it with an old one. "Now she's grounded," Kelly said. By that fall, Alice was spending too much time on Facebook with Michelle. Kelly thought Michelle was aggressive, the way she latched on. She forbade the girls to speak. Alice made a secret Facebook account under another name. Kelly found out. "You're going to end all ties," she remembers telling Alice. This time, Alice obliged. An envelope arrived for Alice a year later with an unknown return address. Kelly opened it. Inside were 3 handwritten pages that Kelly believed were from Michelle. A sort of love letter, it sounded like. Kelly hid the letter from Alice and gave it to her only after the indictment. Another source confirmed the existence of the letter, but Kelly and Alice declined to show it to me. Later, Michelle would speak about her friendship with Alice in romantic terms. She said Alice was her first kiss. I mentioned this to the Fowlsmans and showed Alice the text about the love songs. She said their relationship was never physical. Kelly said Michelle made it up. I asked Alice if she had strong emotions watching her former best friend on trial. Kelly sat without uncrossing her arms. No, Alice said. Conrad's last possible point of exit was the phone call Michelle made at 7:12 when she told him to get back in the truck. That call ended at 7:58. According to the state, then, by 7:58, Michelle must have known that Conrad was dead. But when I reviewed the evidence, I noticed other phone calls Michelle made that night, which were not discussed in open court. At 7:59, she called Conrad. The phone rang for 21 seconds and went to voicemail. She called at 8:02, voicemail. At 8:04, 8:06, 9:15, 9:17, 9:40, 9:49, voicemail. At 10:22, she texted Camden, "Do you know where he is?" Camden walked out to her backyard and showed the text to Lynn. In total, Michelle called Conrad's number 28 times after 7:58. No matter how hard I tried, I could not fit these calls into any premeditated plan. They seemed desperate. They seemed frantic and last-ditch, like the lunge after a vessel that has come unmoored.